Hi guys, and welcome back. Today is a really tricky one, and I kind of don't really know where to start and what I'm going to say. But I wanted to let you all know that we had George put to sleep on this Monday just been. I've got Layla, my support dog's just broken into the room to help us all out and get through this. Layla, come here. You helping? Good girl. You stay down there. Good girl. We lost poor Georgie. Well, we didn't lose him. It was a decision to put him to sleep. I had known for a long time that something wasn't right with George, and he was always just really clumsy, I guess. He stumbled a lot. You would watch him doing, like, moving. I'd ask him to do something, and it was almost like you could watch the message travel from his brain to his feet. Like, it was that slow, and you could just, it was just a very bizarre thing to see, and I'd never known another horse like it. And I wondered at first if it was just his young horse, a tall, gangly horse, and maybe he just needed to get stronger and grow into himself, but it just never got better. His musculature never got better. He never felt like he got stronger. I never cantered him under saddle. I just never felt like I could. He was never a forward horse under saddle, and he wasn't on the lunge either. And then I started to notice some behaviours popping into the groundwork over time, where on the lunge, if I asked him for a bigger trot or if I asked him for a canter, I'd get these really big explosions, and they would sort of he'd be nothing, and then just bang, big explosions. And I just, knowing the temperament on that horse, I watched it and I was like, this is a horse in pain. That's not a behavioural issue. That is a strong pain response. So I noticed that a few times early on, and then it sort of became a little bit more common. In the beginning, it was kind of just when I asked him to canter, and I thought maybe it was a balance issue. And then I noticed as we went along in more recent months and weeks, if I just asked for a bigger trot, he would do it sometimes too. And I just, like I said, to me, it was just quite obviously a pain response. I did get the body worker out, and she found a few tight spots. It was actually her suggestion that I get his neck x-rayed, because she thought that from what I was describing about his clumsiness, that could be a potential issue with the C6, C7 vertebrae in his neck. So that's what we did. I sort of thought about, who can I go to for an x-ray, and called around to a few different vets. And ultimately I decided that if I was going to go down the path of diagnostics, I would go to somebody who was a lameness specialist, and this was their bread and butter, not just a general vet. So I ended up going to see Mike Tweedy from Tweedy and Associates down in Murdoch. I'm really glad I did. We took George down to him, and he did the whole lameness workup, put the sensors on him, saw him move in a straight line and on the lunge, and palpated everywhere. He walked him in a straight line and sort of just pulled gently on his tail, and we just watched George just completely topple out of balance. He didn't fall over. He was just so easily impacted in his balance during that test, and it was decided from there that we go on and do neck and, if called for, spine x-rays. And they did the neck x-rays. Dave and I were there. We didn't have the gowns on, so we weren't standing particularly close while they were doing the x-rays. But once they were all done, Mike called us in and sort of said, look, we've got quite a bit to discuss here, and walked us through what he was seeing, which was that on one side of C6, which is the bone almost at the end of the neck, it ends at C7. Does it? I don't know. It's not important. Anyway, the bottom of C6 was missing. There were parts completely missing. We couldn't get a good image of C6 just because he's such a big horse. It's hard to get a good image, but he may have had issues there too. And the other thing that was found, two other things that were found. So on the top of C6, there were bony arthritic changes, quite severe ones. that undoubtedly had formed because of the deficits with the missing skeletal structures at the bottom of that vertebrae. And then on C3, there was compression of the spinal cord, or wobblers as it's more commonly known. And who knows if George just got really, really unlucky, or I would suspect that the wobblers might have been caused due to the pressures and the issues from the C6 malformation. So it was really not a great diagnosis. And Mike at the time said, look, this is pretty serious. There's no rehabbing this. He's not safe to ride. And probably some discomfort there. And I mean, I knew, having worked with him over I had him for 9 months, guys. And I felt like things were going downhill rather than getting any better. I knew he was in some pain. So, look, when you get a diagnosis like this, and when you are paying to keep your horses on agistment, like I was just sort of went through a real bargaining kind of phase, and I thought maybe I can find somebody that will take him as a pet and he can just live as like a nanny horse or a companion horse somewhere. And I did sort of start that process, and rightly so, I would say. There were some people on the internet that kind of tore shreds off me for doing that and sending him out into the world with no guarantees on where he would end up. And yeah, I agree with them. I think that they had the right point of view, although some of them didn't deliver it particularly kindly. I will say, though, that I would never have let him go to somebody that I didn't know. And yeah, I think the reality was it was just never going to work out that way. It was just that whole phase of grief and bargaining, and how can I make this work for this horse that hasn't even turned 6 years old yet. But as I sort of worked through that process and really considered what the situation really was, it more and more became apparent to me that the kindest call for George would be to let him go. Like I said, I knew he was in some pain. I can't know how much pain, but I know for sure that he was in some pain. And after the diagnosis, even, I was down at the paddock, and I had walked a few paddocks away from my guys to just check in on the foals, and someone drove a tractor by their paddock, and Tassie and George spooked away from the fence, and it should have just been an easy canter away for any healthy horse, and George just couldn't handle it, and he just toppled. He just hit the ground. And I watched that, and I thought, I can't risk this horse doing this to himself and falling and hurting himself in another way, breaking a leg, breaking a neck, and just sort of risking him, risking it having to become a critical decision rather than trying to get in front of the issue and letting him go while he was still somewhat comfortable, as far as I know. So yeah, that's the call we made. And this past Monday, we had lovely Kylie from Mike Tweedy's setup come out, and she let him go. And yeah, it was awful. Like, there's just no way to make it nice. Like, she did a really great job. I think he went down as gently as any horse can go down. But obviously, it's never nice, and there's been many tears cried. I think I'm kind of a bit numb. There has been a lot happening in the last week as well. It actually seems like a lot longer ago that we lost George, because there's just been so much going on with Taz, which there's another video coming that I'll update you about with all of that. And I really want this video just to be about George and in memory of George. So I'll get into that another time. But yeah, it's been pretty hard. And you feel a lot of guilt around making a decision like this, making a decision to take a young animal's life who looks pretty healthy. But the reality is he just wasn't. And it's just a really tragic turn of events. And I mean, I know at least 4 other people off the top of my head who've got horses that have got C6, C7 malformations. I don't think any of them were as severe as George's. But it's a really hard thing to have to deal with. And it sucks for the horses. Racing Victoria has a program in place where if the horse qualifies, they will cover the costs of humane euthanasia on site, and they were able to help us out with George, and I'm grateful to them for that. I do think, though, it's the least that they can do to when there's so many young horses going through, and a lot of them with this particular issue. I don't know a lot about the C6, C7 malformation, but I know that it's quite predominant in thoroughbreds, and I think that there needs to be more research done there. And it's the horses that suffer. There's so many horses coming into the world that are destined for a life of misunderstanding and pain. You know, I worked with George for 9 months before going down the road of trying to really figure out what was going on with him, and there might have been others that wouldn't have gone down the diagnostics route and would have just kept trying to keep him going. I don't know, but it's the horses that suffer, and it sucks. So it's been hard for me. It's been hard for Dave. I've been around horses for long enough, and on agistment properties where there's enough horses and enough owners, where I've seen horses let go before, and it's awful, but I can understand when it's the right thing to do, no matter how hard. It's new for Dave, and the most heartbreaking thing when we were talking about it is he's like, but he's my mate. And he was his mate, and he was everyone's mate. He was just the most loveliest, kindest horse, by far the sweetest, kindest horse of the 3 of my horses. And he just did not deserve it. He did not deserve the broken body that he was born with. And so, yeah, that's the update about George. And it's not how you want things to end up with any horse. And lots of regrets, lots of guilt. But I just want to remember him really fondly. He was just a beautiful boy, and he deserves to be remembered. And yeah, I don't have too much more to say on it. I wanted to let you guys know. I haven't put anything out on socials or anything yet, but I thought, George has been featured on the YouTube page, and if he just disappears, A, people might wonder where he went, and B, I don't think that's in service to George. I don't think, I owe it to George. He deserves to be honoured and remembered. So I wanted to let you know. So that's a bit of a long rambling story, guys. But thanks for listening. And I might close out on a few videos and photos of the boy so that we can remember him properly. Free your mind and be still. Free your mind and be still. Free your mind and be still. And be still. Time has brought us up to this point. It will carry us far beyond it until we are nothing. Sometimes I feel like we're just words on a page. Close your eyes and be still. Close your eyes and be still. Close your eyes and be still. And be still.